I think we can get started, Amy.
Sure. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I just wanted to say hello and kick us off for our session with Nell and Elaine on digital literacy. I'm sorry, I might have not said the exact name appropriately and I apologize. But Nell will, I'm sure, go over that in her introductions. Digital inclusion. There we go. I did have it written down. I just want to remind everybody, if you could make sure to take the survey that will come up at the end of the session today. Your feedback on this is very important to us, and we do appreciate if you take the time to complete those. The session is being recorded, so you will be able to see it on the conference platform after it's concluded. And I think that's it. So with that, I will turn it over to Nell.
Wonderful. So thank you all for coming to the session. Yeah, so go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat if you haven't already done so, your name, the program you're with, your role, and any burning questions you have. And if you don't have them yet, as they occur to you, you can add them to the chat throughout the session. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And while I do that, Elaine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. My name is Elaine Roberts, and I work with Catholic Charities Community Services. And Nell and I also work together in the New York City Coalition for Adult Literacy, leading the Digital Equity and Inclusion Working Group. So Nell, I think, has said this, and we'll say it again, there's a lot of information that is new to everyone. We're learning along with you, and we're really excited to talk about some of this information today.
Yes, and my name is Nell Eckersley, and I also work in New York City at the Literacy Assistance Center, and I have been a long time professional developer around digital literacy and digital inclusion or digital integration, technology integration. And yes, with pandemic, obviously, I think most of our lives have changed quite radically in how we're doing our work. Patrice, I think you mentioned, like, many people are actually joining the conference today from their homes. Some people had to go in the office, but we're certainly not all in Albany together. So our skills and our interaction with technology have changed, and so have those of our students and the whole world. So what we wanted to deal with today was looking specifically at some of the things that are coming up around funding and content and things like that, and adult education. And there is a lot of information. So the slides, you'll get a copy at the end or a link at the end. They act kind of like a big resource bank, and we're gonna try to be careful and not like take you through bit by bit, but you'll always be able to come back to the slideshow, and there's a lot of live links that will take you out to the actual websites or whatever that we're talking about. So we kind of just did our introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the terms around digital equity, digital inclusion. There's a lot of terms floating around, and we just want to kind of get clear so we're all talking about the same thing. We're going to talk about the National Digital Equity Act and then some other funding possibilities or things that are moving already. And then we're going to spend a little bit more time on digital literacy, because I think that's something we can really dig into. Those other ones, you really have to go out and do some reading, but we can suggest places to get the reading, and also places that you can meet up with other adult educators to discuss and learn more. And then we'll talk about what the next steps are. So that's our goal today. As far as terms and definitions, these 5 terms, if you feel comfortable with them, you're going to have an easier time kind of navigating some of the funding sources, and even thinking about how you want to think about grants and proposals that you might want to do, projects you want to do. So digital inclusion, digital equity, I'm guilty of sort of saying both of them and not really necessarily thinking about what I mean when I say one or the other. So digital inclusion is a condition. I'm not going to read it, but anyway, it's the condition about more of the condition and the community aspect of how we are making access to digital information, hardware, everything more abundant, right, for everybody to have. Digital equity are the activities. So that's kind of the difference. And we've been calling, I think, our group that meets through NYCAL. Elaine mentioned NYCAL with the New York City Coalition for Adult Literacy. We have a group that I think I call equity, digital equity, but again, it doesn't really matter in the what we're doing today, but just know that those terms do have specific definitions. And when you are applying for funding, you will want to be careful of those. Digital skills, right? I know that when I was doing professional development before pandemic, I didn't really talk about digital skills, digital literacy as much as I talked about integrating technology for teachers to bring it into the classroom. And we kind of stepped over a little bit, identifying exactly the skills that a student would need or a teacher would need to be able to utilize that technology. So we are talking about the abilities to use digital devices, communication applications, networks to access and manage information. And I think people kind of forget that, like, it's this managing of information that is such a huge piece of the technology that we have these days, right? Like digital these days is really about information. Digital resilience, I think that's a new term for a lot of people. And it's also a term that has kind of other definitions depending in the domain you're talking about. So when I Googled digital resilience like a week or two ago, the answers were mostly around companies and their ability to get their work done. But and by meaning that they have all the systems they need. When we talk about it in adult education or in this realm of digital inclusion, digital equity, digital resilience is really that ability that folks need to develop so they can push through when they hit something hard, right? And we know that happens with technology. I don't know how many of you had a snafu today or had some issue trying to get on to our Zoom, or, you know, we hit these problems quite frequently. And that was always a reason I think teachers were some teachers were not excited about bringing technology into the classroom because the feeling was that it will break, it won't always work. And do you know how to troubleshoot that? Do you know how to come up with alternative methods for dealing with whatever it is? And do you believe that you're able? I mean, the base of this resilience is the same concept of resilience in any way that we talk about in education, which is, you know, kind of self-efficacy and belief that you can get where you need to go. With digital, I think there's a whole bunch, kind of like with math, and, you know, I think of those times when you see teachers or presenters or whoever saying, well, I don't do math, or I don't draw, right? We have the same thing with tech. We're like, I'm not techie. But in reality now, we all are doing a lot with our phones and a lot with our computers, and we kind of need to own that and make sure we bring everyone up to the same level. And then digital literacy, which I think is going to be I think that's going to be in a lot of the funding around adult ed coming up. It's already been defined in WIOA, the current WIOA funding that we have, which is this definition from the American Library Association. And again, it's about information and communication, right? So it's the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information requiring both cognitive technical skills. Actually, that last piece I think is kind of new, but basically that concept is what we are trying to do when we get into digital literacy. Elements of digital inclusion, and you'll see this in some of the funding streams or when there's discussions around the kinds of funding that's out there. Again, made very evident during pandemic times and people's ability to access and interact with online instruction, but also, you know, just getting work done, getting life done. So robust internet service is a major one, and there's been several different funds out there where people could get emergency broadband, but how do you do it, right? And we've seen it in many communities, not everyone who could access that did access it. Internet-enabled devices that meet users' needs, so you don't need to have a Wi-Fi because you have the internet already attached to your phone, for example, or you get a tablet that has internet included in it. Technical support, which is a real struggle, and I think for a lot of programs, you know, maybe you were able to get devices for your students. Maybe you could even help them with the internet, or certainly our libraries in New York City have often been able to lend Wi-Fi hotspots. But technical support can be a real sticking point, right? Like, how do you actually hook up a computer? it's not working. What do I do now? Applications and online content to meet users' needs. That's, we see that when people have been adding apps to their phones to do Google Classroom or whatever they need to do. Some things cost money. Some things require a little bit more to move around inside them. Does everyone have that ability and that access? And then the training. And I think we are going to spend, like I said, a little bit more time on that piece towards the end, because that's really where I think at the minimum, that's what our task is, right? We are already teaching folks literacy skills around numeracy and reading and other topics, right? So now we can no longer leave the digital piece out. We need to be bringing that in. And really why there's funding, as usual, it's with the idea that we need workers who are skilled in these areas. And there's definite data out there that underscores the fact that a lot of folks don't have the skills that they maybe need now for even basic jobs. And we all know the stories of having to apply for a job online, or things that for a job that the job itself does not necessarily mean that you have to do anything on a computer, but you have to do your time card on a computer, or you have to apply for it, or you have to fill out other information on a computer. And if you don't have those skills, you really get left out. We're seeing it with the GED, this shift now for our state where, before about 15 or 20% maybe maximum were taking the test online, and now probably it's going to be more like the 80% who are going to be taking it online. And do you know how to click? Do you know how to select from a drop-down? Those skills are not things you get from your phone, right? So you need to have some time with a keyboard and a screen, and we need to be thinking about that.
So now let's pause for a moment, and maybe what we'd like to do is hear from you all about what elements you are already including in your work, what elements of digital inclusion. So is it devices, or are there skills that you're already teaching, digital literacy training that you're already doing? Is there tech support that you're already providing? So we'd love to hear, maybe just for a few minutes, hear what you all are working on already.
And you can just unmute and speak. We'd love to hear it. We're a small enough group. I think you can just do that. Don't even need to raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to be picking on people. Brian, I might have to pick on Brian.
Well, I don't want to, anyway, yes,
kick us off, Brian.
We're doing, we're doing quite a few things. We have a pretty robust device lending library I think it's now at 80 Chromebooks and 40 hotspots that we have cycled through now. I think 3 cycles of lending them out and getting them back. The return rate is about 75%, but the devices are inexpensive enough and we've been able to manage them. And so I should say that the first thing we were able to do was to hire a full-time digital navigator. That's the person that has really made the device lending work. Keeping track of it is challenging. So part of identifying who needed a device is we did a program-wide survey of who had connectivity issues, who had device issues, and so we were able to use that survey. We did it at the appropriate times to be able to get the maximum amount of information. We used the survey to then distribute the devices to troubleshoot in people's homes often. And then that enabled us, when we were delivering some type of digital literacy to a particular classroom, we had a lot of the important skills out of the way, digital skills out of the way, where people were able to use their device in the way we wanted. So that's kind of like the main thing that we're doing. And then in our individual program services, there's some differing programmatic things, right? So in our bridge programming, we do a lot of digital skilling related to the careers that the career pathways that the participants are on, and it always includes some resume creation and interview prep, online interview prep. Most of the folks are being interviewed remotely. We use cloud-based apps to create the resumes through like a Google form that creates its own resume. We have been funded to do this online banking program, which we have now made part of our standalone digital skills class, which we now also offer remotely. But the banking program we brought to, I think, almost 100% of our classes, where we combine classes and do sort of what would amount to about 6 to 10 hours of online banking instruction, where people can use their computers or phones to sort of manage their bank accounts. And this was born mostly out of the closing of branches in our catchment area. That's just kind of a sampling of what we're doing. And we're doing a project over the summer that's kind of begins as a lending project, where we're going to participate with this other community group who's doing this art project, and we're going to kind of lend out a bunch of devices for a year, and at the same time enroll people for remote digital skilling instruction that we're going to sort of continue for the year. I think that's all I have to say for now. I could probably talk for another hour, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Brian.
And Brian, can you put your contact information in the chat? Because I think some people might want to contact you.
Sure.
And anybody else? There's some good stuff going on in the chat. I'm responding to Lori P, who mentioned NEDP, which is the National External Diploma Program, which is all online. And Rachel also mentioned some of the things she's been doing with students in the lab. What else have folks been doing? Programmatically or you individually?
I'll share what we're doing. So we've recently purchased an additional 60 Chromebooks to use as a supplemental resource in the classroom. We've also purchased Aztec licenses, which help prepare for the GED. They have Tape Tutor, which helps with increasing tape scores. We're getting some good feedback. We have some students that are familiar with navigating computers, and we have others who are just used to a phone or a tablet. So it's been a great way to kind of inclusively allow students at their own level to experience and kind of navigate the online world, especially as the GED has turned to more computer-based testing. We're just working to make sure that students are familiar and comfortable with that. Our first step was Aztec, and we're going to start incorporating more kind of lessons next year.
And Michelle, did that change for you? I mean, this is a result of pandemic, or was this true before pandemic times and remote instruction?
So with the pandemic, I think it kind of forced everybody's hand. And we had a lot of packet programming. And our conversations are, what can we do to make it more handy for people, right? We have people that just want to do the digital version. So we're starting to explore that. And as we came on board this year, we didn't know what COVID would look like and if we had to go back remote. So we said, just get people comfortable with like a Google Classroom, getting on a computer, so we don't lose a bunch of people just because they don't know how to navigate things. So we were just kind of starting with the basics, and then we were able to purchase some more technology that we're now kind of wrapping back into the program.
Fantastic. And Michelle, can you put your information in the chat too, in case people want to?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Nell, I might just add what I was saying yesterday in our group, that one of the surprises of things that we were doing, we started out as offering like internet safety tips and stuff as just part of like normal instruction, right? And we didn't really highlight that as something that would be as significant as it turned out to be. And we kind of realized that the concerns about internet safety had really dominated our population a lot more than we expected. And so that ended up being a much bigger part of delivering some digital skills than we anticipated. And I think I wish I would have known that before, because we would have started by just visiting classes and delivering sort of just like a 2-hour workshop on some basic digital skills. I think there would have been some openness if we would have got that out of the way. The stories that we've heard of people getting scammed were shocking, and it's much different than my experience on the web. And how, to me, it's how kind of evident scams are. The experience of our participants has been different.
And I think that's an interesting topic too in this, and maybe some of you have had this experience where certainly in New York City, what I've been hearing from programs is a lot of students were joining their classes on their phones. And now that maybe classes are meeting back in person and maybe you can access labs, students aren't that interested in working on computers and they're very happy with their phones. And so how do we help them find what's a benefit? And I think the reason I'm connecting it to what you just said, Brian, is that I think finding where the students themselves want more skills, right? So if they're dealing with a lot of concern around safety and not being hacked and not, being contacted for information and giving information that they maybe shouldn't be giving, that's a great place to start and really then build from there. And then with the piece between the phone and the computer, I think finding the things that, we were talking yesterday, we had a meeting yesterday, so some of us were at the meeting, so we'll probably reference it a few times. But one of the ideas, for example, for me would be like, if I have my phone, I can do a lot on it. But if you ask me to write a resume, or you ask me to make a presentation with pictures of my family, or, a book report or whatever, that I would not like to do on my phone. So finding, helping students understand, and teachers too, all of us adults, when do you use which machine? Which device is the best? Which tech tool is the most useful? That's a huge set of skills in the digital literacy world, because we're managing information and communication, and that's what all these tools are doing. So it's different, developing the skill to differentiate and really understand why would I do this versus this. I'm seeing some great chat responses. No, I'm going to say Noe. Is that how you say your name, Noe? If you want to speak, you can. But you're putting some great points in there. Frank Finch mentions Khan Academy. And we're going to have a Padlet later where there'll be a resource column, and we will be sharing resources there too. But I hope you're remembering the things you're sharing here, and we'll make sure to put those into that resource column. Yes, email. The issue with passwords and accessing your content, I mean, isn't that what we all struggle with? I had to change my bank password yesterday for the 100th time. So I'm going to move us on, but again, as things come up or as you think of things, do put them in the chat. We are keeping an eye on there. So funding and advocacy. So what's really spurred us to think about this kind of on a slightly different level than we were, which was really around just the digital literacy skill piece, is the fact that there is funding, and quite large amounts of funding, that are going to be coming from the federal government and some even in our state. And one of the challenges for adult education is often that we're not thought of, like we're not included. We're not part of, the regular K-12 system. Some of you are maybe within school districts that maybe you can access stuff like that. But I know many of us have struggled in the past. Like we do not get teacher discounts. We don't, we don't have .edu in our emails or whatever. And so one of the things that's really important is that when that money becomes available, or as the people are designing the RFPs, that they make them in such a way that we are eligible, and we have to let them know that we exist. That's kind of one of our roles now, even before the money is actually flowing. So I want to start off with this big federal bucket of money. So Digital Inclusion Fund, these are several different funds that are out there, and maybe you're familiar with them. I think this is where we mentioned digital navigators earlier, and a digital navigator, the concept of a digital navigator, generally we think of it as someone who's kind of like a case manager, but maybe has a little extra, has a deeper knowledge or an extra set of knowledge around the landscape with digital inclusion topics. So they know how to help the client to get affordable connectivity, broadband access. There have been a few different programs that have happened since COVID started, and with the newest one, I think, is this affordable connectivity program. We had the emergency broadband benefit before that, and there's a lot of discussion about who's eligible for that. But again, definitely lots of data that's showing that that many people who are eligible are not accessing it and maybe don't know that they can. So having the ability for your case managers or having a digital navigator who can help people access that is a really valuable tool. The other work that we think of for digital navigators, as we said, is also maybe accessing hardware, and then the digital literacy piece, and possibly the troubleshooting or the technical support too. So we're not really going to talk about all of these funding sources. They aren't necessarily things that we can all grab for our programs, but the one that we are particularly interested in is this DEA, this fourth one. So the Digital Equity Act of 2021 includes state digital equity planning grants, state digital equity capacity grants, and digital equity competitive grants. And there's quite a lot of money there, and it's going to be flowing through the state on most of it, but some of it we can actually, technically, we'll be able to apply for ourselves. So Digital Equity Act is what we're really looking at today, and it is one of those ones that we need to make sure that our state elected officials, who are going to be the ones deciding what to do with this money, that they make sure that we are eligible for whatever they are designing. So it provides digital skills training, online accessibility, and empowers rural communities. And all of those are things that New York State and our adult education programs are touching. So it was part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's being administered through the Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications Information Administration. You can actually read the text of it. You don't need to really do that though, because there's lots of other resources out there that have kind of taken it and made it more digestible. Again, these are the buckets of money. This last piece is the one that we might be able to apply for ourselves. The other ones, I think, have to come through the state. So these are the resources I talked about. There are at least, not only are these resources, but these three organizations, the National Skills Coalition, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and the EdTech Center at World Ed, are all really keeping their finger on the pulse of this. So you don't have to sign up for all of them, but each one of them, I think, has mailing lists that you can get on, so you're kept abreast of whatever is coming through. But these particular documents are videos, or the one from the National Skills Coalition is a really nice sort of infographic that takes you through all the different components of the Digital Equity Act. Another source of funding that is actually a New York State source of funding is the New York Digital Inclusion Fund Innovation Grant. And this is a combination of Schmidt Futures Foundation and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And they did a round of funding back in the fall. There were two different grants that time. One was for coalition building. That was a 6-month grant with a set amount of money, and it was to start the process of building coalitions, because they recognized that a lot of work in this area is happening, but organizations are not that connected. So maybe over here, someone's giving out free Chromebooks, and over here, someone's doing digital literacy, but those two programs don't know about each other. And so the idea of building coalitions is something that they really wanted to support. And then they also offered a different grant that was for innovation projects. And these were for more money over a maximum of 2 years. And they said that they would offer a second round of the innovation grant, and that has just been posted. So you're just in time. Unfortunately, today they had their information session, but you'll be able to see a recording of the information session if this is something that you are interested in. And the reason I asked Brian earlier to talk about what projects he's been doing is that actually, Brian, you're part of two of these. The last round of funding you were funded for both, or you were part of a coalition that got funded.
Yeah.
And also had an innovation grant. What was your innovation grant for?
So the innovation grant was in collaboration with this project started by the Hispanic Federation, where there were 5 local groups that Hispanic Federation funded this Latino digital literacy accelerator program across the country. And in New York, there were 5 groups that were involved in this. And the intention was to integrate digital skilling into workforce training programs, which we had developed this bridge program with our partner, Brooklyn Workforce Innovations, for non-native speakers to train as bus drivers and as cable installers. So we integrated these digital skilling programs into that, and we've been doing that for a couple of years. So when the innovation grant came up, Hispanic Federation turned to the local partners to see if there was a plan we could come up with that would increase digital equity in our program service areas. And so that was the innovation grant. And then we're part of this group in Sunset Park that got a planning grant just to sort of map the services that are out there and determine what gaps are in digital equity, really, because the groups that make up what we call the Sunset Park Digital Inclusion Group all have sort of different areas of digital equity that they're concerned with. Some are focused on just sort of tech and troubleshooting tech and providing opportunities for people to bring their devices and get them looked at, sort of IT. And then others like us are really digital literacy and digital skill focused. And so the idea was to sort of get to know what everybody's strengths are, what they already have in place, and how can we sort of work together and build on that so that each program doesn't have to do everything,
Nell, you're on mute.
Yay! I'm sorry. Yes, I was muted. I wanted to take us to go look at their page just because this page does give you not only information about the current grant, but it does take you through the past grant, and there's a lot of resources here. So you can come and you can, as I said, the webinar was today, so they might do another one, but they'll have recordings of that webinar. And then there are other guidelines. And then down here is a list of the folks who won the last round. So lots of information there. Also, Brian put his information in the chat. And we are actually going to be working to try and get some of the other folks that got funded for the coalitions to talk to our group. And we'll talk a little bit about our group at the end of the session today, because we'd love to let them know that we exist program by program, because then maybe you can all be part of the coalitions that are already being built through the past funding here. So the other funding source that is a state funding source, which we're a little frustrated because it was actually put in the budget last year and it never made it out of the Office of Management and Budget. And so we don't quite know the status, but we did a really good job of making sure that they knew we existed and that they were going to make sure that when it was time to put the funding out there, we would have been eligible for it. And it was in having conversations with Assemblyman Steve Otis, who really pushed this through, I think, that I guess for me, what I heard from him was that, yeah, you're going to have to write a proposal that says why we should fund you. And so it made me think that programs should be preparing for that. When the funding comes, you're going to need to say, why is your program the program that should be funded, to be able to talk about the data around your students, actual data from your students that you can gather in surveys, but also that there's a lot of ways to gather data that's already out there through the census and other tools. And we'll be building some more resources around that. but that's something that is work we can be doing while we wait for the funding to come to us. That piece, and I think also thinking through what services, what projects do we want to provide that would be really valuable to our students. So that you can read more about it here. When we talked to Steve Otis earlier, I feel like it was a month or two ago, maybe it was in March, he was hoping also to put money in this year's budget, and I'm not sure that that's in there yet. But, so we're hoping that there's a greater recognition of that, even from our own state government's funding. So what we should be doing now, as I just mentioned, this is particularly true for the federal level funding coming through the state, is that we want to make sure the governor knows that we exist and find out who they are, how they're, what the selection committee is going to be like. To also provide information. I mean, this is that thing of gathering the information that you're going to need to be putting into your proposals. Working on our collaborations and finding out, the folks that are already out there doing work that maybe could work, we could work together with them, and maybe we're providing an element and they're providing an element. Educating policymakers and the world about why adult education is so important. And then this comes from the National Skills Coalition. So the National Skills Coalition is a great place to continue to get information from. They offer webinars, and they have a 101 document that really does break down specifically the federal funding. And we're hoping maybe to get someone from them to come and speak to our group as well, because they can talk to our specific issues. New York State is interesting in that we are behind in technology and adult education compared to other states that are similar to us. So if we think about populations and poverty or access to resources, places like Texas, California, or Arizona, or other states that have a lot of similarities to us, and they are much further along in their work around integrating digital literacy and other parts of tech into adult education. And we are really far behind. So, and that's the adult education side. I think in the regular K-12 side, we're not that different. So there's something going on for us in adult ed where we really need to, raise our standards, not even standards, but raise the work that we're doing. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of leadership from state ed, but I think that could be changing, and it's something that we can maybe push with them, but it's also something we can definitely do in our programs if we can find ways to fund it and know what it is that we should be including. So some ways for you also to stay in touch. We mentioned these, oops, I didn't put it there. We do have two state organizations. There is the Adult Ed Digital Inclusion Network, which anyway, that's the group that we've been talking about that met yesterday. That is NYCAL, the New York City Coalition for Adult Literacy, kind of created a committee to look at digital inclusion work, and this is the group. And we are meeting once a month, and you'll see later on we have a link out if you want to register to attend our next session, which is June 10th?
16th.
16th. And these are hour-and-a-half meetings. We are really, we have guest speakers. We discuss the issues. We are open to topics if you have a topic you'd like to have covered, and we try to work to bring in speakers or people who have more information. And then there's the New York State Library's Digital Equity Roundtable Conversations. And that's really been the one place where we've made sure that adult education has been represented at those conversations. But we've also learned a lot from the other people, and it really is a great opportunity to learn about other programs. So basically these meetings, there's usually 3 different speakers, and they talk about projects that are already underway. And I found them invaluable, and they do record them. So if you go to that website, you can see the past sessions. We did a presentation at the last one, but I would suggest any programs who want to do presentations, you just send them an email. They're looking for people to present. It's like a 10-minute, 15-minute presentation of like, you know, what are you doing? And I think the more we can do that, the more we show that adult education is active in this area. A lot of the folks who've been presenting, I don't think anyone else from adult education has presented. A lot of programs are presenting about working with adults who probably are part of our cohort of folks, but they're meeting them for some other reason, right? So they're working maybe inside of subsidized housing, or they're working with a provider of low cost hardware or something like that. So they're working, they end up serving the same populations we are, but not through the adult education lens. And I think the adult education lens, especially around digital literacy, is a particularly robust element that I would, you know, again, if you want to present, I can certainly talk to you about what that's like. It's, like I said, 10 or 15 minutes, hard to actually get enough out in that time, but you can also see the recordings and you'll see that I think many of you could do a presentation that would be very valuable to that group. So this is the link to register for the next meeting of the library's meetings, which is June 10th. And that's the email address to contact Ashley if you have a topic you'd like to propose. We did a very broad view of adult education and what happened during pandemic, basically, as we moved to remote instruction, and how programs and teachers and students and everybody came together and made that work as well as we did. Then on a national level, again, I've already talked about these organizations. I don't think I mentioned Digital Us before. So National Digital Inclusion Alliance is a very robust mailing list. Oh, I think you can probably hear some fire engines going by. And that's a mailing list to get on, although it's a very active mailing list, and they're often talking very specifically around like the nuts and bolts of particular funding source or a particular service, but still I think very, very valuable. Then there's the National Skills Coalition. They don't do as many emails, but they'll let you know when they're going to be presenting, and they certainly have a lot of resources they're putting out in general around workers and digital literacy. And then World Education EdTech Center kind of is touching all of this, but they have a digital literacy component. They are working on several projects around digital inclusion and digital equity. And their mailing list is definitely another great one to be on. And then Digital Us, which is really, again, around workforce, but has a very strong looking at digital literacy skills and things to be considering when you're working with students.
Great.
Elaine, it's yours.
Thanks, Nell. So what we thought we would do now is dig in a little bit to the idea of digital literacy skills. So we have the definition again, right? Nell, could you forward? Thank you. Right, using these apps and platforms and devices, right, to find information, communicate information, to solve problems. It's really broad. There's a lot of different skills involved. But one thing that we wanted to share today is a draw, is a set of kind of guidelines that might be helpful. So DRAW is an initiative. You just saw World Education in another slide. So it's an initiative of these 4 organizations, but the 4th one is the one that is really important for us. It's the federal, right? It's a federal agency, I guess, the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. But the nice thing here is that these kind of guidelines give you an idea, or give us an idea of what the federal government is viewing digital literacy as, or what it involves. So what we thought we would do, we're going to show there's about 6 kind of themes or buckets that these skills fall into. We wanted to look at them together, and then we would like to give you all a little bit of time just to talk together, just a few minutes, in breakout rooms. We'll look at these together. And then when you go into the breakout room, we thought it might be useful to think about what is kind of a practical skill or activity related to these, right? To these skills that, or these overall themes that you might have done or that you would like to do. So that's where we're going. But before we kind of discuss, we wanted to share the first three here. You can see, right? Digital problem solving, skill strategies, right? Information seeking. This is probably, I know students ask a lot about this. We were talking about this yesterday, right? Now everything you need to do is online. Things for your children's school, for healthcare, everything is online. Every application is moving online. Communication, right? Email communication, other digital tools that you use to communicate. The piece here about diverse colleagues in a digital environment is interesting. I think that probably mirrors a lot of what we do in the classroom. And then these are the other three. So privacy, security, and ethics. We've talked a lot about that today. Students have a lot of questions about this. Content creation, and then learning and upskilling. So none of this is something you learn one time. It's something that keeps changing for all of us. It keeps changing. We have to keep learning. We have to keep adapting. And our students do too. So these are kind of, like I said, 6 themes that the skills kind of fall into. What we would like to do, there's a Padlet that we all have access to. So we'll put the link in the chat. We'll put you all into breakout rooms for like maybe 3 or 4 minutes, get a chance to talk 2 or 3 people together. And what we hope you can do is together add a few ideas or examples of tasks that you've done related to these themes. Does anyone have any questions about that piece? Is everyone able to access the Padlet? Great. So, any questions?
No, sorry. I was trying to click on it and make sure I'm accessing it now, but I think I'm good.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So what we're going to do, 2 to 3 people per room. We're going to open the breakout rooms. So you can discuss together a little bit more. Hi, everyone. And apologies if we interrupted you in the middle of the conversation. We're getting close to the end and we wanted to have time to talk all together. And so what we'll do, I'll share my screen with the Padlet, but we'd love to hear kind of the highlights from your conversation. So what came up and what you shared together and on the Padlet. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. Would anyone like to share kind of detail about what they discussed?
I'll share again. I didn't get to add it, but I was saying that in our program with the switch to GED, we have started incorporating the GED website very early on in our instruction, just to get them familiar. It's a good way to get them on the computer. It's, you know, a task that they'll be able to make sure that they're connected to our program, and as there's some concern when they go to test. So we do that actually in orientation. So as a part of our orientation, we're actually incorporating the laptops as well and getting them used to just getting on. We don't do a ton. And anytime we do use the laptops, we're using them more as like supplemental or to kind of break up the day for them. And it doesn't make it as long and changes things up. So.
Great.
I just added the point, which someone else put already, about making appointments with case managers in person. I think that's really helpful. So we do that one-on-one and also in small groups to help the students, because it seems like, especially transitioning back to, in person, that they needed that little extra help.
I like that.
actually have to leave. So I'm just going to say real quick that room 1 was amazing, and they're wonderful people who help their students a lot. And we all learned Padlet because it was our first time. So this is a very cool thing. So I learned something new today in the digital world. And we did discuss how we go above and beyond to help students, right? So some people have never made an email account before. They don't know what a secure email looks like, what's safe to click on, what's not safe to click on. So kind of teaching them that, showing them the ropes, holding their hand. That kind of goes along with communication and security, I think. Thank you guys. This was wonderful. Again, I have to dash, but it's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
I'll say that in our room, Frank and I, we discussed some financial literacy stuff that he does a lot with, and how we were incorporating our online banking program, and how that kind of brought us to this internet safety issue, and how we've been expanded because we had the opportunity to create that program. We expanded a lot of our financial literacy services, sort of the crossover area there between digital skilling and financial literacy. It's given us an opportunity to get a lot of refer a lot of our participants for financial coaching, which is something that is necessary. I also we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but I wanted to say I meant to say earlier that in our classes, the class decides on their communication tool. Right. So some classes will choose WhatsApp, some classes have choose a WeChat group, some classes choose Remind, or, it's been great to sort of use all these different tools. We've used it not just to communicate about class. Teachers like give homework through it or reminders, but it's been really vital in us sharing COVID related test and trace information, and also know your rights stuff, and anything that's like we want for mass communication. We often find you send an email to a 200 people and very few people open it. But the way these communication tools have been used has been really useful. So we've been able to communicate with our whole population of students, which is, upwards of 400 students, in a more intimate way. We tell the teachers the information we need disseminated, and they share it on their individual apps. And that's been really helpful. And so this crossover between financial literacy, health literacy, all these important areas, our digital literacy work has really helped, and digital being forced into these digital skills has really helped with that.
Brian, can I just add, I feel like in our program too, being forced into it has been great, because I feel like we now have a better idea of like student success and challenges than we did before, because they're sharing it more. Like, oh, here's a picture, like this is my husband, like a student said, my husband's in the hospital, so I can't come. And before, we might not have known that, right? I feel like we're hearing more, maybe more personal information, but I feel like more challenges and more successes than we would have, which is a positive.
I'll also add to that is the support that the students have for each other has really been supported by these tools, right? It's like quick messages of comfort and compassion, and this has all been, the communication has taken on a different form.
Yeah.
And I want to echo that, in that I think that we were talking, Melody was mentioning that she has struggled sometimes with having her students be interested in working on a computer because they're so familiar with their phones and they really want to stay on their phones. And that is a challenge. I'd love to hear anybody's any solutions people have come up with. But I do think it's actually really important to kind of think about the fact that for many of our students, a lot of their communication is going to be via text type of their natural. Like even in my life, right? My natural, what's the time that I actually, outside of work, when I'm writing anything, it's a text, probably. And if you're an ESL student, being very fluent and writing in a text is very different than writing an email. And I think that that's a skill actually that is worth spending some time on, because for many students, that could be a professional interaction or a formal interaction with a teacher or something like that. And it's a funny, I had a a person who was doing a job for me, and she would send me texts that would say like, "Hey lady, feeling I'm delicate today, can't come." And I'm like, okay, because there's a lot of information there she could just said a little differently and it would have been clearer in our interaction. And I can imagine with another, with someone who's not super open or supportive, that would be a turnoff and lead to some disconnection. So practicing, how do you text about this kind of information, I think is actually a really great lesson.
Nell,
Yes.
so to that point, you gave a workshop in Albany probably about 4 or so years ago, 4 or 5, and of one of your workshops. And from that, I took an idea that you gave and a general idea and ran with it. So now I've expanded this texting thing. I've not done a good job with it in recent months because of attendance issues and so on, but the last couple, 3 years, I've had several things they do with text. So one is to find a thesis, like statement, right? Thesis statement of writing. One's professional. And at the time, I think it's expanded, I should know, but I was using 144 characters I was using, right? So they could, do that. And then another thing is how do they analyze a poem in 144 characters, that kind of thing. And so an unrelated point is that someone just made, I think it was, might have been you or Brian, I forget at the moment, note. But I've gone through and surveyed students about something else, and that is I've got a list of websites. And in math in particular, so a quick example for sake of time, Math Planet, Khan Academy, Math Antics, and tried to tailor that to their learning style, like which one likes Khan Academy better, or Antics or Planet. And then classicshorts.com and the Poetry Foundation for their style. I've got a real budding poet or two, a couple of gals that like that. So we try to tailor websites to them, almost like an IEP kind of arrangement. It has not worked well in recent months for me, but the last couple, 3 years for the most part, that really got a lot of productive bang for the buck because they adopted their own websites kind of in toward our goals.
I'm wondering.
That's fantastic. So
Oh,
we're
sorry.
running out of time.
Oh, we are.
So I know people are going to share more stuff. So what I want to say is we will, you have in the Padlet the link to today's slides. And in today's slides is information about our group. There's a mailing list to go with our group that if you just email me, I'll put my email address in the chat. We can add you to the mailing list. It's just for digital people who are interested in the digital inclusion work. And we'll have more opportunities to meet because this was a wonderful opportunity and you guys shared such wonderful things. The Padlet is a very rich resource that you can come back to whenever you want to. So save that link. And we will also be sending out, this was recorded and so you'll be able to actually see this again and then access things that were part of that too. So we really appreciate you being here. We went over 2 minutes. So go take your break and then join your last session for the day. And thank you for all joining in today.
Thank you all.
Thank
Please
you.
take your survey.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Amy.
Got to do my job.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nell.
Thanks,
Thank
Nell.
you.
Thanks, Elaine. You guys did great.
Now, do you want me to save the chat? Send it to you?
I don't think you need to. I think either it will or we'll have I think we're okay.
Okay.
I think the Padlet's good.
Great. So I'm going to end it. Thanks, Nell.
Take care, Elaine. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Melanie.